My name is Vanessa Moore. I'm 38, and for the past decade, I've been the one quietly managing my family's finances, even while they've made it clear I'm little more than a footnote in their world. At our quarterly family dinner in Phoenix last spring, my mother looked me square in the eye and said, "Don't take this the wrong way. We're just being polite, including you. You don't really belong in these conversations." My uncle chuckled. My father didn't look up from his grilled salmon. I took a sip of iced tea, set it down, and left without another word. What happened next? It flipped everything upside down. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever had family treat you like you were invisible until they needed something. On the outside, the Moore family has all the hallmarks of American success. My parents, Denise and Leonard Moore, built a real estate consulting empire in the Southwest. We grew up in a sleek Adobe-style estate outside Scottsdale, wintered in Aspen, and attended schools with names that looked good on alumni newsletters. But behind all that were years of subtle rejection and strategic exclusion. I wasn't the glamorous one. While my younger brother Chase became a high-profile orthopedic surgeon and my older sister Lauren landed a spot as VP of a luxury branding agency in New York, I leaned into numbers. I graduated top of my class from the University of Chicago, built a career in investment management, and eventually became the financial architect behind my family's entire portfolio. The mountain cottage was the first property I ever bought using the trust left to me by my grandmother Helen. She always saw something in me others ignored. She left a note with the funds: "Build something of your own. Let it be beautiful." So I found a serene 4-bedroom cottage in Jackson Hole, vaulted ceilings, panoramic views, and a wraparound porch where you could hear the creek rush after snowmelt. I put it in my name. Liability protection, of course. Still, the whole family used it like it was theirs. When my parents got overwhelmed by juggling 6 credit accounts and 3 mortgages, I stepped in. I negotiated better rates, centralized their accounts, and set up a streamlined family line of credit with oversight and controls, all built on my reputation with the bank. I managed the statements, payment schedules, and investments. My efforts saved them tens of thousands each year. But at family events? I was invisible. At meetings, my suggestions went unheard until my brother repeated them. Then, they were insightful. When the family remodeled our Scottsdale home, no one asked me anything until they needed to access the renovation funds I had helped preserve. That Christmas, I got a $15 Amazon gift card. My siblings got leather luggage sets and custom watches. When I made senior partner at a top-tier firm in San Francisco, the room went quiet. But silence doesn't erase power. And the next move I made? They never saw it coming. My mother's response was a breezy, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Chase is being considered for chief of orthopedic surgery?" I just mentioned landing a hedge fund client with a net worth north of $200 million. My portfolio included retired athletes, venture capitalists, and rising tech founders. Yet at family events, my parents introduced me as someone who works with numbers at a bank. Lauren, 2 years younger than me, followed my parents' lead. She'd often shrug off my investment advice until, of course, she wanted me to comb through her 401k and restructure her portfolio. Chase, the eldest at 42 and ever the golden boy, barely acknowledged my professional success, though he quietly relied on me to manage his savings account, real estate holdings, and even a blind trust he never quite understood. Even my 30-year-old cousin Marissa, who was living in the guest house rent-free thanks to a lease agreement I negotiated and co-signed, often joined in the soft mockery. She'd once joked at dinner that I probably kept spreadsheets for my dating life. Only my Aunt Valerie, who married into the family, would occasionally defend me. She knew what it felt like to be treated like an outsider. But even she chose silence when it counted, unwilling to challenge my mother's iron grip on the family narrative. I tried everything to earn their respect. I hosted elegant dinner parties in my penthouse in downtown San Francisco. I sourced local wines, curated seasonal menus, even brought in a private chef once. They smiled politely, then complained on the drive home about my pretentious Riesling. I designed tailored financial plans for each of them, creating diversified strategies that significantly grew their assets. When their net worth climbed, they credited a lucky market year, not my careful guidance. Birthdays? I went all out: custom gifts, handwritten cards, surprise parties. When Lauren turned 35, I flew in her college friends for a weekend getaway. She thanked me once. When it was my birthday, a group text and a candleless cake. No matter what I did, I was the family utility needed, never valued. The unofficial accountant, the human ATM, the afterthought. They loved to joke about how I never cried, never cracked. What they didn't see were the nights I stood alone on my balcony, clutching a glass of wine, wondering what more I had to give. Still, I clung to the hope, thin as it was, that one day they'd see me. That hope died at the May brunch. Those Sunday brunches were my mother's idea. Family time is sacred, she'd say. But in truth, they were performances, and I showed up each month with a smile and a pastry box from the artisanal bakery near my apartment. That May morning seemed promising. The weather was flawless. Crisp breeze, blue sky, the magnolia tree in bloom. Brunch was on the patio, with grandmother's china and fresh tulips in a crystal vase. "Vanessa, you made it," my mother said, kissing my cheek. She smelled of mimosa and designer perfume. "We're just about to go over summer plans." I placed the croissants on the sideboard. "Brought your favorites," I offered. "How thoughtful," she replied, already turning toward Chase. He was talking about his upcoming conference in Zurich. The whole family was apparently invited. I took my usual seat between Uncle Greg and Marissa, pouring coffee from the silver carafe, pretending I wasn't hearing them plan a European family vacation I hadn't been invited to. "We could stay a week in Geneva, then maybe venture to the Italian lakes," my mother said, her eyes sparkling behind oversized sunglasses. "Leonard, remember that charming village we stumbled on during our honeymoon?" I sipped my coffee slowly, listening as they outlined what sounded like a meticulously planned European vacation. A family vacation. No one looked at me. No one asked about my schedule or whether I'd like to come. Clearing my throat gently, I offered, "That sounds incredible. When in August is the conference?" "I should probably check my calendar." The table fell silent. My mother's perfectly arched brows lifted a fraction. "Oh, Vanessa," she said with a light, dismissive laugh. "We hadn't really thought." She waved a hand vaguely. "Well, it's primarily a family thing." My cheeks grew warm. "I am family," I said quietly. Uncle Greg snorted into his mimosa. Lauren suddenly became very interested in buttering her croissant. Chase looked uncomfortable but said nothing. "Of course you are, technically," my mother continued, her tone shifting into that slow, condescending cadence she reserved for things she believed should be obvious. "But this trip is really centered around Chase's achievement. Plus, we'll be using the family jet, and you know there's limited space." The family jet. The one I had advised them to lease. The financing terms? Negotiated through my contacts. The asset? Managed through an aviation trust one set up to protect their liability. I exhaled through my nose, keeping my voice steady. "I see. I just thought, since I manage the accounts that fund these vacations, I might be included in the planning." My mother's smile didn't move, but her jaw stiffened slightly. She set her napkin beside her plate like she was folding a verdict into silk. "Vanessa," she said, voice crisp, "let's be honest. We're just trying to be polite, including you in these brunches and occasional holidays. Don't overestimate your place in this family." The words struck like slaps, every syllable sharp, calculated. Around the table, reactions fluttered. Uncle Greg chuckled openly. Lauren at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. My father found a sudden fascination with his empty plate. He didn't look up. Didn't say a word. "Denise, that was uncalled for," Aunt Valerie murmured weakly. My brother muttered, "Mom, come on." "What?" she said with a shrug. "Vanessa's good with numbers, but she's not exactly the fun one in the family. I'm just being honest." I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Years of being ignored had taught me stillness. I felt the hurt coil in my chest, cold and tight, but I smiled faintly and nodded. The conversation slid back to Italian rentals and spa reservations like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just been formally disinvited from my own family. I reached for my coffee. Lukewarm. I took one last sip, set the cup down, folded my napkin with precision, and stood. I just remembered an appointment, I said softly. No one protested. My father gave a vague wave. My mother was already showing Lauren pictures of lakeside villas. The 20-minute drive back to my condo passed in a blur. I don't remember making a single turn. Just the soft hum of the radio and the quiet ache in my chest. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned bone white. I didn't notice the tears welling up until I parked. The moment I stepped inside my downtown condo and closed the door behind me, I collapsed. Back against the door, knees pulled in, I let go. Not quiet, composed tears, the kind my mother might have approved of. These were ugly, heaving sobs. My chest convulsed as years of invisible wounds split wide open. Luna, my gray tabby, padded softly into the hallway. She paused, watching me with those wide, knowing eyes, then pressed her warm body against my side. They don't want me, I whispered into her fur. They've never really wanted me. And, just like that, the truth I had spent years trying to outrun caught up with me. The Moore family didn't see me as a daughter or sister or niece. I was a system. A service. A reliable machine that made their lives easier. I wasn't loved. I was leveraged. The tears flowed until there was nothing left. As sunlight shifted across my hardwood floors, I stayed there, motionless. The ache inside was brutal, but something else settled in behind it. Clarity. My mother's words had done something irreversible. They had stripped away the last layer of denial I'd been clinging to. Something fundamental inside me had snapped, but not in despair. In resolve. I was done begging for space in a family that had only ever made room for my labor, not my presence. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in over 3 years. I called my assistant and told her I wouldn't be in. No explanations. Just a simple "I need today." I brewed a strong cup of coffee, sat at my dining table with Luna curled in my lap, and opened my laptop. First, I reviewed my personal accounts. My private investments, retirement accounts, real estate holdings, everything I had kept separate from the Moore family's tangled web. Years of cautious investing and disciplined saving had built a financial foundation strong enough to sustain me for the long haul. Next, I opened the deed to the mountain cottage. I had bought that property in Jackson Hole 5 years ago with my inheritance from Grandma Helen. Everyone used it like it was the family retreat, but legally, it was mine. Only mine. I paid every tax, handled every repair, covered every inch of insurance. No one else had a claim. Then came the shared credit line. I had opened it under my own credit profile. My family were just authorized users. The financial responsibility? All mine. I'd used family funds to cover the payments, but if anything went wrong, I would take the hit. I downloaded a year's worth of statements. Chase had racked up thousands in fine dining and designer sneakers. Lauren's charges read like a luxury lifestyle blog, BMW leases, spa weekends, boutique hotels. My parents? Grocery runs, wine shipments, property expenses. I created a detailed spreadsheet line by line of every financial service I'd provided for them, managing their multi-million-dollar investments, handling their taxes, negotiating insurance, overseeing real estate, working directly with their estate attorney. By the time I finished, one truth stood stark and unignorable. They didn't just benefit from my skills. They depended on me. Their lifestyle. Their ease. Their vacations. Their image. All of it was built on my quiet, invisible labor. The irony was staggering. They had dismissed me, minimized me, while simultaneously relying on me for the very structure of their lives. They needed me far more than they understood. I stepped away from my spreadsheets and called my friend Stephanie, a corporate attorney I met at Harvard Business School. We'd remained close for over a decade. She was one of the few people who truly grasped the dysfunction in my family dynamic. They said what? She blurted after I told her about the brunch. Vanessa, that's not just disrespect. That's emotional abuse. I know, I said quietly. I've been explaining it away for years. Making excuses. So, what now? What are you going to do? I paused, staring out the window at the skyline. The thought had been forming all morning, and now it felt fully formed. I'm thinking of removing myself financially. Completely. Good, she said without hesitation. It's long overdue. What can I do? I'll send over some documents. I just want to make sure everything I do is airtight. Send them, she said. And Vanessa? You've always deserved better than this. Always. After we hung up, I got to work. First, I contacted a real estate agent I trusted in Jackson Hole. The cabin was going on the market. I would liquidate the asset and place the funds into a trust, one only I could access. Second, I initiated the process to close the family's shared credit line. Any legitimate family expenses, like property maintenance or shared insurance, would be redirected to my parents' personal accounts. Anything else? Gone. Third, I drafted an email to Jackson Wu, my trusted colleague at the firm. He would take over the management of the Moore family portfolio. I offered a 1-month transition period to document everything and ensure compliance. Then came the subscriptions. Over the years, I'd consolidated countless services under my own billing to make things easier. Wine club memberships, streaming platforms, Amanda's meal deliveries, Chase's gym memberships. I began canceling or transferring each one. I spent hours sending emails, making calls, archiving receipts. Each action was methodical, professional, and legally sound. I wasn't taking anything that wasn't mine. I wasn't punishing them. I was simply exiting. With each confirmation email, something inside me shifted. The girl who had spent decades trying to be worthy of their love was gone. In her place stood a woman who no longer needed their approval to define her value. The pain was still there, like a bruise that flared when touched. But it sat beside something stronger now, self-respect. That evening, I called Aunt Valerie. While not always vocal, she had shown me quiet kindness over the years. I felt she deserved to hear it from me first. I'm making some changes, I said after the usual small talk. Following what happened at brunch. Oh, honey, your mother didn't mean it like that, she said quickly, defaulting to the usual script. She meant exactly what she said. And it's okay, Aunt Valerie. It helped me see things clearly. There was a pause. What kind of changes? I'm disentangling myself. Financially. You won't be impacted directly, but I wanted you to understand it's not out of anger. Just clarity. Another long pause. Then, softly, I understand more than you think. Do what you need to do, Vanessa. That night, as I prepared for bed, the doubt crept in. Was I being too harsh? Would this destroy what little I had left with them? But then I remembered. My mother's tight smile, my uncle's laughter, my father's silence. Nothing would change unless I changed it first. I silenced my phone, curled up with Luna, and for the first time in years, I slept. Deeply. Dreamlessly. The decision was made. The plan was already in motion. There was no turning back now. To my surprise, the Jackson Hole real estate market was quite active for late spring. 3 days after listing the cottage, Melissa, my agent, called, her voice buzzing with excitement. I've got multiple interested buyers, she said. One couple in particular is eager. They're offering $15,000 over asking for a quick, cash sale. I sat at my desk, gazing out at the hazy San Francisco skyline. Do they understand it's being sold as is, fully furnished? That's part of the appeal, Melissa replied. They want a turnkey vacation property, someplace they can use right away. The cabin. The one my family had treated as theirs. Soon, it would belong to strangers. It was the place we'd spent Thanksgivings. Where Chase taught his son to fish. Where my father once claimed he did his best thinking on the porch. I felt a brief twinge of guilt. But then I heard her voice in my head again, my mother's clipped, in different tone, "Don't think you matter." My expression hardened. "Let's accept the offer," I said. "How soon can we close?" "If all goes smoothly, 2 weeks." "Perfect. Send me the paperwork." I ended the call and walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of Cabernet. This was really happening. The first domino had fallen. Oddly, I didn't feel triumphant. Instead, it was a complicated mix of sadness and relief. I wasn't taking anything from them. I was just done being used. Done hoping for love that came with conditions. The next morning, I visited my bank to address the shared family credit line. James, the personal banker I'd worked with for years, greeted me with a warm smile. "What can I do for you today, Miss Moore?" "I need to close the shared family line of credit," I said, sliding over the documentation. His brows rose. "The entire account? This is a sizable one." "Yes, all of it." I've already rerouted legitimate business expenses to individual accounts. The rest needs to be shut down. Please give the authorized users 48 hours notice. Understood, he said professionally. Is everything okay? No issue with the bank, I replied calmly. Just changes to our family's financial structure. He processed the closure while I signed the final paperwork. Another domino. Back at the office, I began the next task, the subscriptions. Netflix, Hulu, HBO, Apple Music, Spotify Premium, Wine Club, Whiskey Club, Cheese of the Month, Amanda's Meal Kits, Chase's Luxury Gym, my mother's fashion boxes, my father's rare book club. Each email was brief, courteous, and direct. Cancellation or transfer instructions, effective immediately. The final piece was the investment portfolio. That required a conversation. I met Jackson Wu in his office later that week. He scanned the account overview, eyebrows rising. This is a major portfolio, he said. Are you sure? I am. It's personal, not performance-related. He nodded. I'll handle it with care. I've prepared detailed notes, holdings, strategies, patterns, family quirks. You'll have everything. With each step, I felt the scaffolding of dependency I'd unknowingly built begin to dissolve. What remained was mine. Entirely mine. Jackson, ever the consummate professional, gave a small nod. I'll take good care of them. Will you still be managing your personal accounts with us? Absolutely, I said. This only affects the family portfolios. The next day, I devoted myself to creating individualized financial summaries for each family member. I listed every service I'd managed: investments, tax prep, insurance, subscription tracking, expense management. I explained what changes had been made and what steps they now needed to take on their own. I was more generous than I needed to be. But I wanted to make sure there was no room for accusation, no claim that I'd acted out of spite. This wasn't about sabotage. It was about liberation. Clean, clear, and documented. As I worked, notifications began lighting up my phone. Subscription cancellations confirmed. The bank verifying the credit line closure. Melissa forwarding the signed offer for the Jackson Hole property. Each ping grounded me in the reality of what I was doing. After years of quietly running the engine of my family's financial life, I was hitting the brakes. I was stepping out of the machine. It was terrifying and thrilling. That evening, while preparing dinner, the first text came through. Amanda, of course. Amanda. Hey, something weird with my meal delivery. They said the payment failed. I read it, then returned to sautéing onions. I wasn't being petty. This was just the consequence of change. The next morning, the cabin's closing documents arrived in my inbox. I brewed a strong cup of coffee, sat down, and reviewed every page. My name, my authority, my signature, releasing a property I had once hoped would bind my family together. I thought back to the day I'd bought it. I was so excited, so hopeful they'd see it as a gesture of love. Instead, they'd treated it like a utility. Never once did anyone thank me. Not really. I signed the final page and, with it, let go of more than just real estate. The cottage had always represented my yearning for belonging. Now it represented closure. The funds would hit my personal account within days. By the end of the week, most of my plan was complete. The cottage was sold. The shared credit line? Closed. Subscriptions? Cancelled. Portfolio? Transferred. Every step had been documented and executed with care. I had nothing to hide and everything to protect. Still, silence reigned. My parents hadn't contacted me, nor had Chase. Amanda, however, had sent several increasingly frantic texts about her services being broken. That Saturday evening, exactly 1 week after the brunch, I made myself dinner, poured a glass of Pinot Noir, and sat on my balcony with Luna purring softly beside me. The breeze was warm. The lights of the city sparkled. For the first time in years, I felt calm. Then came the storm. My phone buzzed once. Then again. And again. The family group chat was suddenly, explosively alive. The first message was from Chase. Anyone else's gym say their payment didn't go through? What's going on? Before anyone could answer, Amanda chimed in. All my subscriptions are canceled: Netflix, Hulu, Meal Kit, What is happening? I took another sip of wine. The reckoning had begun. What is happening? That text came from my father, rarely active in the family group chat. Diana's wine club delivery was refused today. Something about the payment method being invalid. Then, my mother chimed in. The housekeeper says her last direct deposit didn't go through. Vanessa, are you seeing these messages? There appears to be an issue with the accounts you manage. I watched the flurry of texts appear one after another. My wine glass rested lightly in my hand as I read in silence, watching confusion slowly morph into agitation, then into the first signs of dawning realization. Amanda again. Wait. Vanessa. Did you cancel our subscriptions? Chase followed quickly. Vanessa, call me ASAP. Something's wrong with the family credit line. I set my phone down gently on the armrest and looked back out at the city. The skyline shimmered in the early night air. 3, 2, 1. My phone rang. Mom. Straight to voicemail. Seconds later, Dad. Also voicemail. The group chat exploded. Half a dozen messages in under 2 minutes, ranging from confusion to frustration to flat-out demands. I felt removed from it all. Like a spectator in a movie I'd seen before. Same cast. Same plot. Different ending. After the 5th call in under 10 minutes, I sent a brief text to the group. I've made some changes to the financial arrangements I previously managed. Nothing illegal or improper has been done. I'll explain everything next weekend. Silence, briefly. Then the storm resumed. Chase. What changes? Why wasn't this discussed with the family? Amanda. You can't just make decisions that affect all of us without consultation. Mom. Vanessa Lynn Moore. Call me this instant. The irony almost made me laugh. For years, I'd been treated like background noise. Now, my presence was suddenly indispensable. My voice, which had once been irrelevant, was now urgently needed. I turned off notifications and returned to my glass of wine and the stillness of the night. They hadn't even discovered the real shock yet. That came Sunday morning. I was sipping coffee in the sun-drenched kitchen when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Uncle Greg. Curious, I answered. Vanessa, he barked without so much as a greeting. What the hell is going on with the cottage? Frank Matthews just texted me. Says there's a young couple measuring for curtains. They told him they bought the place. I took another sip of coffee. That's correct. The sale closed Friday. There was stunned silence on the other end, then shouting. You sold the family cabin without telling anyone? Have you completely lost it? It was never the family's cabin, I said calmly. It was mine. Purchased with my inheritance. Titled solely in my name. I was fully within my rights to sell it. But your parents were planning to spend July there. Chase's kids. Yes, I said. Everyone enjoyed using my property. Unfortunately, things have changed. This is unacceptable. Your mother will be livid. I imagine she will be, I said, voice light. Goodbye, Uncle Greg. I hung up, then blocked his number. Something I should have done years ago. Within minutes, the calls came faster. My parents. Chase. Amanda. Cousins. Texts. Emails. A wave of panic cloaked in entitlement. But I felt nothing but peace. I spent Sunday wrapped in peace, intentionally. I browsed my favorite independent bookstore in the Marina District, lost in pages and the scent of old paper. I lingered over lunch at a tucked-away cafe with sun-dappled tables, then walked along the waterfront, the salty breeze brushing my face as sailboats drifted by. My phone buzzed constantly in my bag. I didn't check it. By early evening, the tone of the messages had changed, no longer angry, but uneasy. Demands gave way to polite requests, and then to half-hearted attempts at concern. The latest voicemail from my mother actually tried for tenderness. Vanessa, we haven't heard from you all day. We're worried. Please call us back so we can talk about whatever's bothering you. I smiled. It was classic Diana Moore. In her world, any situation that disrupted her comfort must be caused by someone else's irrational emotional outburst, never by her own words or behavior. Monday morning brought a ripple into my professional life. An email from Jackson. Vanessa, I've been contacted by your father regarding the family portfolio transition. He seems, surprised by the change and has expressed concern about proceeding without broader family consultation. Given our firm's emphasis on transparency, could we schedule a meeting to ensure everyone is aligned? I replied with steady clarity. Jackson, as we discussed, I am the sole authorized manager on the family accounts with full legal discretion to transfer their oversight. My father holds no official authority in this matter. Please proceed as planned. If this poses any discomfort for you, I'll begin the process of transferring the accounts elsewhere. His reply was swift. Understood, Vanessa. No need to transfer. We're fully aligned and happy to support you. The shift had begun. Throughout the day, messages from my family turned softer, more strategic. Texts offering to hear me out. Voicemails suggesting family therapy. An email from my father proposing a formal business meeting to restructure the family's financial systems to better reflect your contributions. By Tuesday, desperation was obvious. My mother sent a message that almost resembled an apology. Vanessa, if this is about brunch. I may have spoken too harshly. You know how I get after a second mimosa. Let's talk, please. Chase, blunt and direct, skip the sentiment. Vanessa, whatever Mom said, we can deal with it later. I really need access to the investment accounts. I'm closing on a vacation property next week and was counting on that liquidity. That one stung. He was buying a vacation home. Something no one had even imagined when I quietly owned the family's favorite retreat. It said everything about my place in the Moore hierarchy. The real panic arrived Wednesday evening. My phone rang, an unfamiliar number. I answered without thinking. Vanessa, my father said, his voice taut. The family cards are being declined. Everywhere. Your mother had to walk out of Nordstrom without her purchase. This has gone far enough. I closed the shared credit line, I said evenly. As the primary account holder, it was my right. But why? He snapped. What possible reason could you have for doing this, to all of us? I took a breath, then asked calmly, do you remember Sunday brunch, Dad? When Mom told me she was just being nice, including me, and that I shouldn't think I matter. Do you remember what you said in my defense? There was a long silence. Nothing, I said quietly. You said nothing. I let the word settle. You've never said anything, Dad. Not when she belittles me. Not when I'm dismissed at family gatherings. Not when I'm excluded from decisions, but included in the labor. So now, I'm removing myself from the equation. I kept my tone steady. No more financial management. No more cabin. No more shared accounts that I organize while being treated like a footnote. Vanessa, you're overreacting, he said, his voice tightening. Your mother just speaks without thinking sometimes. This isn't about one comment, I replied. It's about a lifetime of being useful but not seen. Valued for my output, not my presence. I'm done with it. We need to sit down and discuss this as a family, he said, firm. We will, I replied. Sunday. Noon. At my condo. I'll send calendar invites. And with that, I ended the call. That night, as I turned down my sheets, my phone lit up one last time. A text from Aunt Valerie. I heard about everything. For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. Whatever happens Sunday, remember, standing up for yourself is never wrong. I smiled, feeling the rare warmth of her support, and switched off my phone. The stage was set. I spent the next few days preparing not just my home, but myself. I deep-cleaned my already spotless condo, ordered pastries from the same artisanal bakery I had once brought to that disastrous brunch, and carefully arranged my living room so everyone could sit comfortably and face me. I wanted no barriers, no hiding places. Mentally, I mapped out everything I needed to say. On Friday, I booked a last-minute session with Dr. Lewis, my therapist. They'll try to minimize your feelings, she warned. Reframe the story. Maybe even attack your character. I nodded. What if they refuse to acknowledge anything? Then you'll learn something important, she said gently. You can't control their reaction. Only your boundaries. Sunday came, bright and sharp. At exactly noon, the doorbell rang. I exhaled, smoothed the front of my simple navy dress, and opened the door. They had come together, of course. My mother in tailored white, my father behind her, stone-faced. Chase looked tense, Amanda unreadable. Uncle Greg trailed behind, already frowning. Aunt Valerie stood apart, her eyes meeting mine with the smallest of smiles. "Please come in," I said. "Thank you for coming." They filed in, scanning the setup, pastries on my grandmother's silver tray, linen napkins, delicate china cups. A quiet but deliberate reminder that I, too, was part of this family's legacy. My mother glanced around, unimpressed. "Well," she said, lips tight, "you've certainly gone to some trouble." "I believe this conversation deserves it," I replied evenly. "Please have a seat." They arranged themselves on the sectional instinctively, mother and father at the center, Chase next to Dad, Amanda beside Mom. Uncle Greg off to the side. I took the armchair facing them. My father cleared his throat, ready to lead. "Vanessa, we're here because of the actions you've taken. Selling property, closing accounts, disrupting the family's finances." Before we talk about that, I interrupted calmly. "I want to explain why those actions were necessary." My mother sighed dramatically. "If this is still about what I said at brunch." "It's not just one comment," I said, cutting in. "It's a pattern. One I've lived with my entire life." Kyle frowned. "What pattern?" "You've always been included in family events." "Included, yes," I said, locking eyes with each of them. "Valued?" "No. I've spent years managing this family's finances," I said, voice measured. "I created systems that saved all of you time and money. I handled portfolios and tax strategies that would have cost hundreds of thousands to outsource. And yet, when it came time to plan a European family trip, I was an afterthought." "That's not fair," Amanda cut in quickly. "The Switzerland trip was built around Chase's medical conference. It made sense for the family to attend." "Except me," I finished. "Despite the fact that I managed the accounts funding that trip. Despite the fact that I arranged the lease on the jet you're using." An uneasy silence filled the room. "Vanessa," my father said in his practiced, professional tone, the one he used in boardrooms and mediation rooms. "We do appreciate what you've done for the family. Perhaps we haven't expressed that adequately. This isn't about appreciation, Dad. It's about respect. About being treated like a full member of this family, not just the household CFO." "Of course you're equal," my mother said lightly, waving one hand as if brushing off the tension. "Don't be so sensitive." Uncle Greg let out a low chuckle. "Equal? Diana, you literally told her she doesn't matter at brunch last Sunday." The room went still. All eyes turned toward him, even his own widened in surprise, as though he hadn't meant to say it out loud. "What?" he said defensively. "I'm just telling it like it happened. I was there." My mother's face flushed. "I did not say that. You said," I cut in quietly, "that you were just being nice by including me, and that I shouldn't think I matter when it comes to decision-making." Uncle Greg gave a small, bitter laugh. My father remained silent. Chase looked vaguely guilty, but said nothing. Amanda focused intently on her nails. "You're leaving out the context," my mother insisted. "We were discussing one specific trip." "The context is my entire life," I interrupted. "The context is watching Chase and Amanda be celebrated and consulted, while I've been expected to quietly support everything behind the scenes. The context is you dismissing me. And Dad never, not once, standing up for me." My father shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. "Vanessa, family dynamics are complex." "They certainly are," I agreed. "Which is why I've simplified mine." I sat forward slightly. "The cabin? Legally mine. Sold. The shared credit line? In my name. Closed. The subscriptions? On my cards. Cancelled. The investment portfolio? Already transferring to another advisor." "But why?" Amanda asked, baffled. "Why punish all of us over one brunch comment?" "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm setting boundaries. I'm no longer offering professional services to people who don't respect me." "This is about money?" Chase asked incredulously. "You're holding our finances hostage because you're upset?" I met his eyes. "No. This is about recognizing that I deserve basic respect. Something this family has consistently failed to offer." My father folded his hands. "So, what do you want, Vanessa? An apology? More acknowledgement? What will it take to reinstate the old arrangement?" And that question, so transactional, told me everything. It wasn't, "How do we rebuild trust with you?" It was, "What do we need to give you to get things back to normal?" But how do we get the financial support back? My father asked, his tone still caught between negotiation and disbelief. I don't want anything, I said calmly. I'm not bargaining. I'm simply informing you of decisions I've already executed. I stood, walked to my desk, and returned with a neat stack of folders, one for each of them. I've prepared individualized summaries, I explained, placing the folders on the coffee table. Each one contains a full overview of your current financials, recommendations for next steps, and contact information for reputable advisors who can take over where I left off. Amanda stared at hers as if it might explode. My father flipped his open with a businessman's instinct. My mother, predictably, left hers unopened and untouched. This is absurd, she said sharply. We're family. Families don't keep score. They don't invoice each other for help. You're right, I said gently. They shouldn't have to. Because real families offer support out of love, not obligation. They value every member equally, not just the ones who serve a function. And they speak up when someone is being mistreated. I let my gaze move around the room, steady and unflinching. I've spent most of my adult life trying to earn my place in this family. I bought the cabin hoping it would bring us closer. I managed your finances hoping my skills would be appreciated. I made things easier for all of you, while quietly letting my own dreams come second. My voice didn't waver. I'm done trying to earn what should have been freely given all along. So what now? Chase asked quietly. Are you cutting us off? No, I replied, soft but firm. I'm setting clear boundaries. I'm still part of this family, but only on terms that protect my well-being. I glanced at them each in turn. I will no longer manage anyone's finances, but my own. I won't provide free consulting, advice, or crisis cleanup. I will attend family events only when I'm genuinely wanted, not out of duty. And how are we supposed to know when that is? My mother asked, her tone sharp with sarcasm. It's simple, I said. Invite me because you want my company. Ask for my input because you value it. Defend me when I'm disrespected, even if it makes things uncomfortable. My father looked thoughtful, already analyzing consequences like a business negotiation. But Aunt Valerie finally spoke. I think what Vanessa is asking for is more than fair, she said quietly. And it's time we all looked at how we've treated her. My mother shot her a withering look, but said nothing. The rest of the meeting unfolded like stages of grief. Denial. We've always included you. Anger. After all we've done for you? Bargaining. What if we include you next time? And finally, slow, reluctant acceptance. As they began to leave, my father lingered by the door. I should have spoken up, he said quietly. At brunch. And before that too. I'm sorry, Vanessa. It was the only truly sincere moment of the day. It caught me off guard. Thank you, Dad, I said. I'm not sure if things can go back to the way they were. They can't, I said softly, cutting in. But maybe they can be better than they were. He nodded slowly, then turned to join the others waiting by the elevator. As I closed the door behind them, I leaned against it and exhaled. I was completely drained, but in a strange, unfamiliar way. I felt peaceful. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood firm. I hadn't diluted my voice for the sake of harmony. I hadn't bartered away my boundaries for the illusion of inclusion. Whatever came next, that victory was mine and mine alone. In the weeks that followed, the reactions played out in predictable patterns. My mother maintained a frosty silence, speaking through my father only when absolutely necessary. Chase sent sporadic texts, most of them thinly veiled attempts to get financial input, despite my clearly defined boundaries. Amanda alternated between sending frustrated messages, full of veiled guilt-tripping, and cheerful updates as if nothing at all had happened. Surprisingly, it was my father who made the most consistent effort. He began calling once a week. The calls were short, careful, sometimes awkward, but they were steady. He asked about my work, about San Francisco, about Luna. Never about the cabin or the accounts. Eventually, the conversations began to find a rhythm. We talked about books, current events, even moments from my childhood I hadn't thought of in years. I was remembering that solar system project you did in 4th grade, he said during one call. You insisted on calculating all the planet sizes to scale. Stayed up until midnight triple-checking your math. You helped me, I reminded him. You could have told me to go to bed, but instead you helped me measure, paint, glue every ring and moon." He chuckled. "You always had a mind for numbers even then." It wasn't enough to erase decades of silence while my mother sidelined me. But it was a beginning. A window, if not a door. Without me, the family finances had to be restructured from the ground up. My father hired a respected wealth management firm at a steep cost. Amanda texted to complain about the fees, conveniently forgetting that I had provided those same services without charge. Chase eventually hired his own advisor. A few days later, he messaged me. "Didn't realize how much work this all is. Respect." It was brief, but it was something. 2 months after that confrontation, Aunt Valerie invited me to lunch at her favorite French bistro in the city. "You've certainly stirred the pot," she said with a smirk as we sat down. "Diana's still fuming over the cabin." "I figured," I said, scanning the menu. "Thomas is different, though," she continued. "More thoughtful. I overheard him tell Greg that he'd failed you as a father." I never thought I'd hear that from him. I looked up, caught off guard. "He said that." She nodded. "Things are shifting, Vanessa. Slowly, but they are. You standing up for yourself made people question the roles they've accepted for years." As we ordered, I thought about that. "I didn't do it to change them," I said. "I did it to protect myself." "I know," she replied softly, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "That's why it's working." She paused. "And I should have spoken up for you more. I'm sorry." And for once, I believed she meant it. "I didn't," I said softly. "You were in a tough spot yourself. Mom never made things easy for anyone who married into the Moore family." Aunt Valerie gave a small, grateful nod. We spent the rest of lunch catching up on her kids, on my work, on the book club we'd both recently joined. The conversation flowed easily, warmly. It was one of the few times a family interaction had felt natural. In the months that followed, I began building something new. Without the constant weight of managing everyone's finances, I discovered space, emotional, mental, and literal, to explore parts of myself I'd long neglected. I signed up for a pottery class, joined a weekend hiking group. I started volunteering with a nonprofit that teaches financial literacy to underserved communities, using my expertise in a way that felt impactful and respected. I invested in friendships that had once lived in the margins of my schedule. Stephanie and I started meeting every Thursday for dinner or drinks, no longer canceling due to last-minute family needs. Jackson and I, outside of work, discovered a mutual love of live jazz and contemporary art. My neighbor, Emma, who had lived across the hall for 3 years, but been little more than a polite nod in the elevator, became my go-to for movie nights and spontaneous late-night chats. About 6 months after the family meeting, I received a simple text from my mother. "Your father's birthday dinner is next Saturday at Le Bernardin, 7 p.m. We'd like you to join us. No guilt. No request for assistance. No manipulations. Just an invitation." I considered declining. But something in me said to go, with clear boundaries, low expectations, and an open mind. To my surprise, the dinner was almost pleasant. My mother remained somewhat cool, but she made a visible effort to include me in the conversation. Chase asked thoughtful questions about my volunteer work. Amanda, surprisingly, shared anecdotes from her latest case files with less competitiveness than usual. "You look well, Vanessa," my mother said as we waited for dessert. "There's something different about you." "I am well," I replied simply. She nodded. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in her expression, something that looked a little like respect. The true turning point came 3 months later, when Chase's wife, Jessica, gave birth to their second child, a baby girl named Elise. We gathered at the hospital. As I held the tiny bundle in my arms, Chase looked at me seriously. "Jessica and I were hoping," he began, "that you'd consider being Elise's godmother." I blinked. "Really?" "Really," Jessica confirmed from the hospital bed. "You're the most responsible, compassionate person we know. We'd love Elise to grow up with your guidance." My heart swelled, not because of obligation or expectation, but because, for once, it wasn't about what I could do. It was about who I was. "I'd be honored," I said softly, cradling my niece. Nearly a year after that fateful brunch, I hosted a dinner party at my condo. Around the table sat Stephanie, Jackson and his husband David, Emma, and, to some surprise, Aunt Valerie and my father. My mother had declined the invitation. Some changes, I've learned, take longer than others. But her absence didn't dampen the joy of the evening. As we finished dessert, my father raised his glass. To Vanessa, he said, voice clear, who had the courage to teach an old man some new tricks. Later, as guests were leaving, he lingered. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. Not just for your success. Or your financial brilliance, though that's impressive. I'm proud of your strength. Your integrity. And for once, I believed him. Your willingness to demand the respect you deserve, my father continued. I should have given that to you freely long ago. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. My relationship with my mother remained cautious and limited. Chase still occasionally slipped into old habits. Amanda, predictably, couldn't help herself from making the occasional passive-aggressive comment. But something fundamental had changed. Not just in how they treated me, but in how I allowed myself to be treated. The cabin was gone. The credit lines closed. But in their place, something far more valuable had taken root: self-respect. Genuine relationships, forged not from obligation or utility, but from shared respect and appreciation. I had finally learned that family, real family, isn't defined by last names or shared dinner tables. It's defined by love that doesn't have to be earned. By support that isn't transactional. By respect that's freely given, not begged for. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is walk away from the table where respect is no longer being served. And sometimes, the most meaningful inheritance isn't a cabin or an account balance. It's the quiet, powerful courage to say, I matter. Not for what I do, but for who I am. If you've ever had to stand up to family for your own well-being, share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated, please like and subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your worth. Thank you for listening, and remember, please leave your comments in the comments section. It is very important to me.